Hi, I'm Hal Rubenstein, and welcome to The Happy Grown Up. It's actually the day before Thanksgiving, which has always been my favorite holiday, simply because it's not really about turkey. In fact, at our house, we don't even have it at dinner, prime rib for everybody. As much as it is about family, friendship, love, and gratitude. However, this year, there are some added courses being brought to the table, and unfortunately, they're heavier and thicker than cornbread stuffing. Now, in addition, COVID separated us from our friends and family for a couple of years, and though we've gotten to see them since it was over, Zoom, changes in how we work, and the power of social media to reorient our friendships and interactions with others have brought us too close, too often, to a kind of isolation. I mean, you may have 9,000 friends on Facebook, but how many of them are you going to have dinner with in the next 2 weeks? Everyone is affected, including New Agers who have been impacted in a very different way because we have spent our lives doing things in person and face to face. So how do we handle this? Well, I can't think of a better person to ask than my friend psychotherapist, Dr. Jen Hartstein, who many of you will recognize from her frequent appearances on the Today Show and her other encouraging and uplifting posts on Instagram. Dr. Hartstein is kind, she is smart, she is compassionate and clear-headed, and always looks for the positive solution. So I think maybe she can help us not only through the holidays to make them brighter, but now that you're probably going to be hearing this sometime in 2025, how do we make it better going forward in the year ahead? It's a lot to ask of you, Dr. Jen, but welcome to The Happy Grown Up.
Well, thanks for having me. How much time do we have to solve all those problems, Hal?
A few hours.
Okay, perfect.
No, let's get it down. I mean, am I wrong in imagining the mood right now?
No, I think that, I think the past year plus, right, has been heavy, and probably the past 2 months from the election even till now is heavy, and people are worried and concerned and unsure of where things are going to go. So I think there's just all this uncertainty makes many of us, myself included, very anxious, and you can feel that everywhere you go.
When people approach you with this kind of anxiety, what's your immediate response? You just feel people to just chill and it'll be fine? Or what do you start telling people?
Well, I think fundamentally, we have to start with what can you actually control? Right? We are all anxious about this unknown next step. And we have history that informs our present, but all we really have is the moment you're in. We cannot determine what's going to happen, how it's going to impact us. We really have no idea. So my first response is usually like pump the brakes, right? Let's just slow down a little bit so we can actually think about where do we have control? What do we have control over? And then how do we focus our energy there?
And what do we have control over?
Ourselves. At the end of the day, that is literally the only thing you have control over. You and I have no control over whether or not the price of eggs change either, right? But I do have control over being an educated shopper, or I do have control over saying, I don't want this to be the case for the next 4 years. So what can I do to prepare for midterm elections if that's something that I'm worried about? Or what can I do to support the local guy who maybe is selling eggs cheaper and I can get, so what can I do for myself? Because at the end of the day, well, I can control myself. That may have a ripple effect and control other things, but I only can control myself, my reactions, and my behaviors.
So isn't it about a change of focus? Because frankly, the only thing that, and I don't want to say you have control, but the only place where you have really influence is probably the people sitting around that table at Thanksgiving.
For sure. I mean, and you might not even have influence over them, right? Everybody's coming in Thanksgiving with their own whatevers, and we have to remember that like you and I might sit at a table together and we may not agree. And I can only say, here's how I feel, and hope that you will take that in and hear that, and that we have respect and acknowledgement that we can agree to disagree, or we can kind of work together to make something different. But I also need to remember that it's not my job to convince anybody else either. So where my boundaries and how am I protecting myself in that moment? Because
yeah, but I don't really want to make this conversation about politics because it's a no-win situation. People have made the decision. You had the power to vote. No, they did. But in one of our previous conversations, you spoke very specifically about something that you called radical acceptance, and I would love for you to explain it again.
You got it. I read your mind. So radical acceptance is the idea that, and it's a really beautiful and wonderful practice for all of us, that it's the idea of it is what it is in like the purest purest sense of that phrase. It's not the like when you kind of get annoyed with someone and you're like, it is what it is, like deal with it. It's not that at all. It's really that belief that it is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it. We can't change the situation. We can't change how we feel or, about it necessarily. We just have to kind of embrace it as it is. And when we do that, we kind of go from this sense of suffering and real struggle in that moment to being able to be like, okay, now that I've accepted it is what it is, I can figure out what I want to do about it. And that's not just with politics. That might be sitting around a Thanksgiving table with family members you don't particularly like, and that maybe you've set boundaries with, but they have to be there and they're going to be there. So how do I accept that this person is there? Or it can be true of a coworker that you have to see every day that you just bat heads with all the time and you guys just don't get along. But I can radically accept that that person is there and I have to deal with them. So what can I do to protect myself, navigate it so that I'm not stuck in my own suffering? And that's a place that many of us have a hard time with. And if we can embrace it, wow, that intensity of emotion just drops and there's some calm that comes along with that.
But even taking it away from any kind of political discourse, in terms of new aging, there are certain things in terms of our behavior, in terms the physical changes that go through our body, that go through our brain. These are also places that you were very specific about realizing radical acceptance, and how do you cope with those? Whether it's health concerns, whether it's memory concerns, whether it's the fact that you can't dance the way you used to, or you read a book and you can't remember when you pick it up again, you can't remember what page you
were. Or you
were at.
walk into a room and you don't know why you walked in there. I mean,
why did I come here?
Exactly. I think radical acceptance is kind of, there's like stages, right? So if we're faced with a problem, and some of the things we have to radically accept are going to happen whether we like them or not, right? Aging is the alternative is death. So like aging is going to happen. So yay, like how do we embrace it? Because I can't, now, are there ways that I might be able to slow that process by how I work out and how I eat and cosmetic procedures and not sitting in the sun? And like, are there things that can slow the aging process? 100%. So that's a problem solved. So if we think about, here's my problem, I'm aging. If we want to call it a problem, I'm not going to call it a problem. It's just a thing that's going to happen.
It's a reality.
It's a reality. Yes, exactly. So here we are faced with this reality. I have three options. I can change how I feel about it. I can change how I think about it. I can change what I do about it. But at a certain point, we run out of runway on those things. And so I have to accept it as it is. Right. So if I'm saying, hey, I'm getting older, I want to be healthy. What am I doing to protect myself? Well, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to work out and I'm going to do all of those things because those things are really important to me. But at a certain point, they're still not going to stop the fact that my back hurts or that I can't lift as much weight as I might have lifted 15 years ago because I'm not the same age as that. So I have to radically accept that it's going to be different. Doesn't mean I don't do it. Right. So if I can't change how I feel about it, change how I think about it, or change the situation, I have to lean into that idea of radical acceptance.
Well, how do you get to that place simply so that you can sort of reassess yourself and give yourself a break?
So I think most of us get there because we're feeling super frustrated a lot of the time. Like when you feel that, like I'm sure you've been in that place where you're just like, something's got to give. And oftentimes when we're kind of got fists clenched, like body clenched, we have to take a breath and we're like, all right, maybe there's nothing I can do. Right. And that's like when you feel like you're banging your head against the wall repeatedly, you probably are not accepting a situation as it is. And so there are a lot of tells and a lot of cues and a lot of pieces of information that we just ignore because we're like, I'm going to change this thing. I'm going to change this person. I'm going to make it different. When you notice you're in that tug of war, and it takes, some of us get there faster. Some of us, it takes a lot longer. We can see people who are doing that in our lives. And we're like, if you just let go a little bit, it'll be better. Everybody gets there in their own time. So if you notice that clenching and that gripping, that may be your sign that you need to like let go a little bit. And
do you do breathing exercises? Do you go to meditation? Do you talk to a therapist? I mean, I'm sure it's different for everybody.
Some of it might just be like, all right, I'm fighting. Some of it might just be self-talk of like, wow, I'm fighting this thing that's not going to be any different. So what do I do now? And then we have the choice, give up, give in, do nothing, right? Or now that I've let go a little bit, and here's the thing, how do I want to feel about it? We now have another situation we can enter into, right? But if we're gripping onto the thing that's not working, some of it's just being able to be like, this isn't working. Why? And we often externalize that. And we need to stop and say to ourselves, what's my role here? What am I doing that? And that might mean taking some deep breaths, getting grounded in your space. It might mean talking to a friend. I think if we really are holding on too much, that it's really interfering with our life, 100% I recommend going to find professional help. But very often, a reality check with a friend. I don't know, I'm really having a hard time letting this go. And someone can be like, well, it's not going to change. And that might be the light bulb you need.
Even though, like, you may have close friends, some people have a hard time sort of admitting weakness to their friends because everybody wants to be the hail fellow well met when we meet for a drink, we meet for a cocktail. And you got to be sort of careful of which friends are they that you can confide in and express, to be honest, express your weaknesses.
Well, and and you're talking about vulnerability, right? Like, how
yes,
do we allow
absolutely.
ourselves to be vulnerable, and with whom can we do that? And I think that most of us, if we really stop and just think for a second, 2 or 3 names will pop to our minds of like, these are my safe people. Like, these are the people that will reality check me honestly, but with love, will hold my hand in those moments that I need it, will sit in the crap with me when I need them to sit in the crap with me, and they will be there in that space. I know that I have a lot of friends, and there are some friends that are 100% my go-tos, and there are other friends that I'm like, is that the place that I should take this? And the only person that can really determine that is you. And that may be a little trial and error, right? You might, as we get older, we know who our friendship circle gets tighter in some ways because those people that we can be vulnerable with become our ride or dies, right? Like,
well, there are some friends we really like, but there are also those people like, don't bring me no bad news.
Correct. And so those are not, and you might bring that person and they're like, but it'll be okay, and look to the bright side and cheer up. And you're like, okay, this isn't the person I can do that with in the future.
Many people, they do big confessions on social media. They'll go on and write a treatise on Facebook or on Instagram. Are those things positive, or is it depend on the way how somebody constructs that sort of confession, or is it something you don't recommend?
I have so many thoughts on that. I think that to your point from earlier, right? Life has changed so that there is so much more online interaction that we now kind of think that that's the way to interact. So I think that there's a couple different ways to look at that. For some people, I think there is this genuine wanting to connect, share their story, create community around that situation, which we know community is an amazing protective factor for so many of us as we get older because it protects us from dementia and heart issues and stress and anxiety. So community is great. So I think the people that are coming out is like, hey, community, here's what's happening in my life. Does anybody relate? Can we connect on this? That's could be helpful. But I think there are people who, what the teenagers call, are like pick me people, right? And they want to share their story to get attention. So it's really not about anybody else. It's about what that they feel that there is a sense of connection. And it's like, pick me, where it's really just about trying to find validation externally and not trying to find that internally. So I think that, and it exists, by the way, in every piece of the continuum along that, right? So I think before someone puts a big confession out there, I would ask them, what are you doing it for? What's the purpose, right? Are you putting it out there because you really think this is helpful and your community will support you? Wonderful. Are you putting it out there because you just want attention and that external validation, which does make us feel good momentarily? Maybe then it's not the right thing to do because, like, what's that getting? Can you get it someplace else that's more meaningful?
My goals with Happy Grown Up is to create a community where people can exchange ideas and information, but I don't want it to be a bitch session.
Right.
Because that goes nowhere. I mean, bitch sessions are just very self-serving. I finished venting and I'm done now. And, I don't know if those people really want advice or they just feel better because they threw it out there and say, I want everybody to be as miserable and upset as I am.
Right. Well, in any interaction, I think this is true at any age of a person you're dealing with. If someone comes to you with a problem, I do this in my practice, but I do this with in my life, right? And it started with my dad in some ways. When I was a kid, if I would come to him with a problem, he would go to problem solve it for me. And sometimes I did just want to be like, I just need to get this off my chest. I don't need anybody to do anything. I do just want to vent. So he would say to me, what ears do I need to listen to you with? Do I need to listen with helping ears or just listening ears? Like I can go, gee, that sucks. And I would have to, and so we would start many conversations that way. when I was younger. It was brilliant. And I've kind of brought that even further. And what I say now is, do you need me to help you? Do you need me to listen to you? Do you need me to intervene? Which area do I need to be paying attention for? Because some people actually do just need to come and be like, I just need to tell you about this crazy nonsense I dealt with today. And they just need to say it, and they need someone to validate that it was a crazy day, and then they can move on.
So they know that they're not alone, or that somebody else has had to go through this as well.
That they feel seen and heard, right? Validation is such an important part of relationships. It lets the other person know you see them and you hear them. So if I called you up and I was like, oh my God, Hal, I have to tell you about this crazy nonsense I dealt with today. And you go, well, what'd you do? And did you do this? And did you do this? I'm going to be prickly because you're not stopping and going, wow, that sounds really hard, Jen. That was a really crappy day. Now I feel like you heard me, right? And you saw me and you like recognized that I had a crappy day. And I go, wow, yeah, thanks so much for saying that. Feels like weird in the moment for us to do that, but that's what builds connection. Someone feeling heard by another person. If you jump to change the situation for me, you didn't hear me in that moment. I might want your opinion, but maybe I don't want it right away. And so so asking those questions can be so helpful. What do you need from me right now? I want to make sure I'm there for you. Do you want me to listen? Do you want me to problem solve? Or do you want me to intervene? And then people can be like, oh, what do I need from you? Which also helps them kind of narrow down what they need. And then they can come back at you and be like, I just need you to listen. And you can be like, cool. And you can sit back and listen and be like, wow, gee, that sucks. They feel good. And then you can like move on to the next topic. Or you can say, I had some thoughts. Can I tell them to you right now? And they might be like, yeah, I don't want to hear them. And you can say, okay. Right. But it allows communication to be a little bit different and a little bit more meaningful when we have validation and problem solving, because people do like to bitch, but they're bitching. And I would rephrase it that they're sharing their stories because they really want someone to see and hear them.
You sent me a couple of studies which basically talked about how young people are actually feeling a greater sense of dislocation or disassociation and loneliness than people over 50, than grown-ups. And why do you think that's different?
So I think for a couple of reasons, right? And in last year, the Surgeon General came out saying like loneliness is a current epidemic, and it has a lot of impact in a lot of different ways. And I think that we have a couple different reasons. I think as we get older, there's things that happen for us where we know that our friend groups are going to change.
And by the way, we're not just talking about women here. We're talking about everybody.
Across the board. There really no
men,
major
women,
gender discrepancies.
Women, gays, straights, that's it,
yeah,
right?
There were really no major gender discrepancies. I think younger people really got affected by COVID in that time period in ways that, as they're building relationships and building networks and creating that space in ways that we as older people, we have those networks, right? We've built a lot of that for many of us. We have roots where we are, so that allows us to build. This isn't everybody, but I think fundamentally for most of us, like we have a lot of that already happening. So we're not building it, and we know how to have in real life around the table interactions, where younger people have a much harder time with that. They're learning it through a digital age. So it's like a whole weird thing. So I think that's one piece. And I think as we get older, we also expect relationships to change. We are dealing with people in our lives dying. We are dealing, there's so much more of that flexibility that happens. And then I think thirdly, and this may be a surprising one, I think that we get into a give less shits era.
Oh yeah, older people really don't give us. I mean, on one hand, that's one of the fun things about getting older is you don't give a shit what anybody else thinks.
Right.
But
it also can make us more isolated. Right?
Exactly.
Right. So I think we give less shit. So we don't get wrapped up spending time with the nonsense that a lot of younger people spend a lot of time with. Right. Do they like me? Do they not like me? Do I need to please them? And as we get older, while that still occurs, it's less salient. So we're like, but look, I have this group and I'm going to focus on this, not on this thing that I'm missing. So I think we invest more time in the relationships and the positivity of things we have.
Well, we also have a history with people, whereas I think younger people are more obsessed with social anxiety, being liked, being accepted, going into a group. By the time we're in our 50s and 60s and 70s, that group has been established. It's been edited down. It's been changed a lot by you said, whether it's through death or divorce or moving, or retiring, or leaving a pocket where you were familiar.
Correct.
for many
But I
years.
also think very often when we leave that pocket, we go to a pocket where there are like people, right? So this isn't, I think that you might go to like a really cool over 55 community where there are a lot of people, where there are kind of built-in ways to also build community. Maybe there's a mahjong club or a poker group, or let's watch sports together, or, there are ways that you're kind of in a space. And not everybody has this luxury, but I think a lot of people kind of are figuring out as they get older, I need community. How do I build that? Where do I find it? If I go to this place, are there also going to be people experiencing similar things to me? And I think we do get more similar as we get older than we are different, because we're dealing with a lot of similar issues.
Do you think that women are more prone to be adventurous and to listen than men are? Because men are so busy thinking they should always have the solutions.
I think, well, but then that actually argues your point, right? If men always think that they should have a solution, then they're going to be the ones that are more adventurous, because they're going to go out and try and find the thing. But that is counter, because women tend to be more social, right? So it's like, and at the end
Exactly.
of the day, truly, I think it's going to depend on the person, right? I think of my own marriage. Like, I am a very social person, but if we were in a very new space, I would not be the person making all the friends. My husband 100% would be the person walking into a room being like, hey, everybody, what's up? Here I am. Let's be friends, right? Because that's who he is. I'm a little slower to warm up. So I think it very much depends on who, the where, the what, but I think men might be we should really go do that. And then women are going to be, if it's a couple that's together, women are going to be the one that make the plan.
Well, my husband's not that kind of guy.
Wait, well, he's not going to make the plan. You're going to make the plan, but
Ever, ever,
right,
ever.
right. And
I mean, once he's feeling comfortable, he will extend himself. But that initial walk into a room full of strangers or people you may or may not know, no, it's not his favorite space to go.
That's where David and I are similar, and you and Matt are similar, right? Like, you guys are like, whatever, let's just go talk to people. And I'm like, can I take in the room? Can I understand what's happening? Can I get a sense of what's up? And that's okay. That doesn't mean we won't get there, but it's knowing your own limitations and like, okay, I'm going to go to this new place. What do I know about this new place? Where can I make connection? What's available to me? And how do we do that? And I think that's always a challenge, especially as we get older.
Now, we were talking about, two couples here, you and me, who both have partners. But as people get older and happy grown-ups in 60s and 70s, very often people do no longer have partners. A lot of people wind up, I think it's like, was it 30% of people over the age? Yeah, 30% of people over the age of 50 are single. How do you motivate? When you're younger, you date out of so many superficial fun reasons. You want to be with somebody pretty. You want to meet somebody new. You want to get laid. I'm not saying none of those things matter when you're older, but
there's more about companionship, I think, when you're older than it is about those.
Yeah. And I think too, your sense of aggression when you're younger is different because you feel like you can conquer the world. When you're 60s and 70s, you're more sort of grounded in the reality and what's already happened in your history. And it becomes sometimes it's harder for people to go, especially if most of your friends are partnered and you're not. I mean, do you continue with these people? Do you keep going there, or do you wind up sitting at that table feeling like a fifth wheel? So again, how do you handle that?
Such a hard one, and I think of a very dear friend who's in her 50s, and her husband passed in the spring, and we have these conversations of like, what do you do? And one of the things that she has created, which is beautiful, and was creating as her husband was more and more ill, was she has a village, right? And her village is like the women in her life that are important to her. And that's a way that she communicated information to people. And she leans on her village, and her village, of which I am honored to be a part of. We recognize that like sometimes I'm going to go hang out with her and I'm not going to bring my partner. And other times she's going to come hang out and she's going to know that he's going to be around. I mean, I can't make him vanish, right? He'll be there, and they get along beautifully. They have a lovely relationship. But I think some of it too is being able to ask, hey, can I have some just you time? And she's able to ask that question really beautifully and ask the women in her life for like alone time with them. So she doesn't feel like the third, fifth wheel, right? Or whatever wheel she might be in that interaction. And I think it is creating, what does that village look like to you? And that may be 3 people. I mean, she has like 12 or 14. I mean, it's amazing what she created, and how many people want to be there. But Maybe it's 3 people are your village.
Yeah, because she's not the norm,
She's
frankly.
not the norm, but maybe it's 2 or 3 people that are your village, that are your people, and you create opportunities with that person. And maybe that's traveling with them. Maybe that's once a week a dinner. Maybe that's they're your, bridge partner, whatever it is. But who are those people that you are they're your theater buddy, but where are you creating those moments so that just your partner died, and I think we all then go, oh my God, my social circle's done. And I think the bigger problem becomes that people don't know how, and this is a whole different podcast, but like people don't know how necessarily to interact with somebody who lost a partner, right? So they don't know, like, just pick up the phone and call. Like that support is better than ghosting and ignoring and disappearing. So that's a whole different conversation. But I think that know who your people are and don't be afraid to say, hey, can we do, or hey, can we go out just you and I need some girl time, or I need some boy time, or I need some whatever time. I think that asking is a first step. And then I think finding all right, now I'm by myself. What do I like to do? And maybe I like to, I don't know, maybe I'm a runner and I still can run and I like to run. Is there a running club near me that I can join so I can meet people? One of the things you and I have always talked about is having friends of different generations and different decades and different spaces. So like, where can you meet those people, right? Can you go to do you like to do Pilates or yoga? And like, I found when I wanted to make new friends, I went to the same class at the same time every week. And so did a lot of other people. And so then I kept seeing the same people. And then it was, oh, hey, how was your week? And then little by little that turned in, can we get coffee? And then friendships built, right? We're not kindergartners where we're automatically best friends with the person who sat next to us. I mean, it just doesn't work.
No, but so many of the people that I've spoken to, on these podcasts have talked about as you get older, one of the keys, not to discard the people who you've been friends with for a while, but that you need to get a new circle of friends, a younger circle of friends. And the odd thing is what I've discovered in my experience, and I said the same thing as you, people hesitate to go and do that because they figure, oh, I'm old and everybody's going to judge me and I'm going to be the old guy. And frankly, honestly, most people don't give a shit about your age.
And most
They
people aren't
don't.
looking at you.
No, all they care about is, are you fun to be with? Are you interesting to be with? Have you can bring something to the table that they don't know? And especially when you're older, you have stories and experience that they do not have. You know about a world that they will never see again. It's funny. I was with 2 friends yesterday who I hadn't seen in 5 years, both marvelous people from the fashion industry. And we were talking about fashion in the 90s. There was that Vogue documentary, and some of it's great, some of it's not. But we talked about how we had this amazing run, this great together when fashion was just the most fun. And it was so easy to be with people, to share time. But that world doesn't exist anymore because now everything is online. Everything is separated. Everything is Zoom. People work at magazines and stores and hey, the last book I wrote, I didn't meet my editor until the book was published. We did the whole thing on Zoom. And there's a connection when you see people face to face that younger people don't know. They don't get it. And then when they finally are confronted with people and storytellers, which basically older people are usually better at, they're excited. They're kind of shocked. Yeah, I think you have to sort of pick yourself up by the scruff of the neck and say, I'm going to throw myself in there and see how it works.
Well, I think the fact is that the obstacle we all face when we're in a new situation is fear. Right. And I don't think that goes away regardless of how old you are. Right. What's going to happen? How am I going to be received? Is it going to be okay? And we have all of these worry thoughts that just get in our way. So we avoid, because when we avoid the thing that makes us anxious, we feel better. Automatic reaction. That's how our bodies work. So the biggest thing we have to do if we're trying to get out there, meet new friends, maybe we move to a new town, we're trying to meet new people, we're trying to date, whatever it is you have to acknowledge that you're afraid. Right. And oftentimes if we just say, God, I'm really anxious about this, you know what happens? Our anxiety incrementally goes down. Just by saying it out loud, it drops. And then you can say, yeah, makes sense that I'm anxious. I can validate myself. Makes sense that I'm anxious. This is all new. And I'm gonna do it anyway.
Well, it's funny because I have one of the Substacks we're going to post about is talking to yourself out loud for 10 minutes every day. I think we've discussed this because it's one thing when it's ruminating in your head. it just, all it does is get you confused. It brings you down. When you actually hear yourself talking out loud about your fear or how you want to move it forward, there's something I don't get it. There's something more powerful about it. There's something more reassuring about it when you hear your own self thinking this way and going, why am I so afraid? Why? Look, everybody, on one hand, we all say we want change, but frankly, everybody's terrified of change.
Change is the hardest thing any of us face, period. And is the only constant in your life.
That's a great point.
Right? Change is happening everywhere at every millisecond all the time. We're changing just in this conversation. Not even just because we're talking, but because the air changes, because our cellular bodies change. Everything is changing constantly. So it's hard, but it's the only thing you can rely on at all times.
Look, it's the same thing when you look at products designed for us as anti-aging, and it's a joke because we age every single day, no matter what happens, no matter what you're doing, no matter what you put on your face.
Right, exactly. So I think that we are so afraid of it because we're afraid of the unknown, and that self-talk makes it a little bit more known, right? It kind of is like, but hold on, okay, I'm anxious. All right, I'm anxious. Well, why am I anxious? Now I can have a little mini dialogue, and I can kind of, when we're on the hamster wheel in our head, all it does is get sticky, and the thoughts are sticky, and we just get lost in the maze. Where if I kind of say it out loud, I'm like, oh, right, I'm anxious. Well, that feels good to admit. What do I want to do about that? Maybe I don't want to do anything. Maybe I'm going to ride the wave of the anxiety, and it's going to go away, and that's fine. Maybe I go, well, is there anything I can do? No. Okay. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to just approach the thing that makes me anxious. And then magically my anxiety might go down because I just did it.
Especially for something as, tremulous as dating again. And because frankly, if 30% of people over 50 are single, they want to date. You want companionship. You want to be with somebody, whether it's for affection, whether it's for sex, whether it's a companionship or somebody to talk to. How do you sort of coach or help that person who doesn't want to be by themselves, but they have so many fears because they're no longer that pretty young thing or that handsome young stud? At least not in their head.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Well, I actually think people are older are quite great. I think my husband's a knockout. So, and he's in his 60s. But people look in the mirror, and on one hand, I think especially of these generations I'm talking about, on one hand, we look at the mirror and go, wow, I didn't think I would look this way at this age. I actually look better than I think. But how do I venture to the stronger vision of myself?
All right, so my first reaction when you just said that, I hate the word but. I hate the word. Here's why. Wow, my body is so much stronger and I look better than I expected. That's validation. That's beautiful. That's this lovely giving back. But you just took everything you said away. It just all, right? So if I say, hey, I look in the mirror, my body looks better than I anticipated. I am strong. I got muscles. If I say, and I'm not the pretty young thing I was 30 years ago, both those thoughts can be held in my brain at the same time. And then I can say, and, right? But gives me two options. It's like an either or. And
yeah,
I can't expect to be that. And most people I date aren't going to be that same thing that they were before, but they might look really strong and their bodies might not look the way. And now I've got option after option after option after option after option, right? So, but either or, that needs to go away because it takes any sort of positive self-talk you actually say and throws it in the garbage.
But I think also, too, I think that another thing to add to that is you have qualities at 60, 50, 70, whatever it is, that you didn't have when you were 20, 30, 40, which is knowledge, experience, a sense of self, success in business, but possibly having had a successful marriage and children who you love and care for. And that, it always bothers me when I hear the trepidation of friends, of this era who just they're terrified of putting themselves out there as if none of that has any weight or none of that has any bearing. Meanwhile, they're incredible qualities to have.
Right. And I think, but we all, I joke that we're all kind of perpetually in high school. And I think dating.
Well, because we are.
And dating brings all of that back up, right? It just up all that insecurity. So it's hard to kind of find. This is why you need a couple people that are your hype squad, right? That are going to be that can be sure, you're nervous, but this can be great. And it's a great opportunity, that are your pom-pom cheerleader, got your back, just go do it. See what happens. Just try it. Like, it's kind of like the old Life cereal commercial, right? Like, try it. You'll like it. Like, you don't
Mhm.
know. And I think we psych ourselves out because of that fear. And if we can be like, yes, this is scary. It's new. I'm overwhelmed. I'm not the same person I was when I was 25. Thank God I'm not the same person I was when I was 25 because I bring so much more. And some of that's like, we need to be our own hype person to be able to go into that. And I think our insecurity is something that can help shut us, can help motivate us, but it can also help shut a lot of us down. And especially if you did have a partner who was like the love of your life, sometimes going back out there is like, but it's not going to be the same. Of course, it's not going to be.
Of course, it's not going to be the
Of course,
same.
it's
That
not
doesn't
going
mean
to
there
be the
can't be somebody else. That's great. But I think going back to that idea that we're always in high school,
same.
because we are, people seem to forget dating was never fun.
Dating.
Dating was never, it always sucked. It's very funny. I was talking to some young guys and they were talking about, oh, I hate running around. I hate dating. I want what you and David have. Do you have any idea how many frogs I kissed before I got to this one?
Mhm.
No, you don't just jump over. And in the 50 years between the first time I started dating until now, the choreography or the dynamics of dating have not changed one bit.
The way you can date and you can meet people has changed, but dating has not changed. And I think people forget young people. My complaint with young people, and I work with them a lot, so I hear this a lot,
Yes, I know that. Yeah.
is they forget the amount of work that it also takes, right? Like building relationships takes work and effort and attention. And I think part of why young people, to go back to your question about why might young people also be lonelier, is we live in this immediate gratification culture, and they don't often, I know I'm making a gross generalization, but they don't often realize how much work and effort, and like, you need to water the garden for the flowers to grow. And they expect to like plant a seed and boom, there's a flower. Like, we don't live in a cartoon. It doesn't exist that way. So I think that's the hard part too, is that we all as older, as new agers, like, we know that like, you need to water the garden, you need to work, but we're tired. So sometimes it's like, I just don't feel like gardening today. And I think it's okay to honor that too. Like, if you don't feel like you want to cultivate new relationships, don't this week. But next week, maybe you need to try again, you know?
You also have to take it to the effect that, when you're younger, you don't have a history of behavior that's settled. You're searching, you're adventuring, you're finding, let's be honest, you're 60 years old. You got a pattern. You got a pattern. You got a system that works for you. You like the things you like. You eat the things you want. You live the way you do. You have the home you have. You're in a certain financial situation. So when you're young, people don't ask how much money everybody has. But if you're used to a certain way of living, and you meet somebody who basically has half or a third of what you do, that sometimes it's a difficult thing to mesh and a difficult thing to get together. So how do you sort of coach that person to go out there and realize it's going to take this kind of time, but you also come, I can't call it baggage, but you do come.
You come with luggage. You want to get somebody that has matching luggage to you, or at least complimentary luggage to you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. But that's true when we're dating, when we're 22. We have the baggage just growing up, right? So,
but you have more luggage when you're older.
You have a whole cart instead of maybe one or two pieces, but like,
oh, you got trunks.
We got steamers. We got steamer trunks.
You have steamer trunks. Come on.
It's true.
You do.
But I mean, I think you have to remind, like, you don't have to like everyone you meet. You aren't, every person in your life you have not enjoyed. You didn't keep them all in your life just because you had to. So
hardly.
So some of it, and as you've gotten older, and I certainly know this is true of me, like, there are people who are still in my life and there are people who I've outgrown, even though they were in my life for 25 years. Maybe they're no longer in my life, because there's an ebb and flow, like the ocean is representative of not just the ocean, but like how our bodies work and how relationships and life works. There's this ebb and flow of all the things. And so I think you cannot let the fear and the discount the possibility.
Going back to friends you have a long period of time, I'm fine with the friends who I've had for 20, 30 years, as long as they're willing to move forward with me. If you want to spend your days talking nostalgia, I'll probably have dinner with you once every 6 months or a year. But because I don't want to live there. because I want to move forward. So how do you sort of help or coach that person who does want to put themselves out there, but is trepidatious and is afraid of the judgment and stuff because they feel more vulnerable when they're older to go out there and date?
Sure. I think this is where that self-talk that we kind of have highlighted comes back in, right? How can you talk to yourself in a way that encourages you, right? Like, can you kind of remind yourself, like, what have I got to lose here? Like, there's nothing, there's, this is, and I think some of it comes from like, are you doing this dating situation because you want it or because other people think you should have it, right? Like some people have like this very robust, rich group of, I'm thinking of a woman that I know that has like this beautiful, she's in her 80s, beautiful, rich group of friends and family and all this stuff, and has been single. Her husband died many years ago. She's been single for a very long time and is like fulfilled beyond in her life and is okay. And other people will be like, well, why don't you date? And she's very fulfilled. So I think it starts too with like, what do you want? Like, how do you feel that your life is fulfilled? Is it fulfilled because you need a partner and you want that companion? Or do you have that in the friends and the community that you make? And that's the question I think you have to answer first.
Well, so if it's more about, is it about desire or the self of convenience? Because that's what everybody else expects of you.
Right. Or meeting others' expectations, which never works and always fails.
Ever. Yeah.
Do what works for you. So then I think once you answer that question and you're like, okay, I would like to date, then you got to kind of decide, well, what's that person look like? I mean, not that we're, not to be like, you're going to manifest that date, but what does that look like? What is that person? What are the characteristics? It's kind of like we did when we were kind of looking for a life partner. What does that person look like? I'm not saying you're looking for a life partner, but what we do gain as we get older is we are much more discerning consumers. We don't waste as much time just dating anybody who asks us. So I think you can kind of narrow it down, and then you can like use your network or, what's the community you're in or where do you start to meet those people? And I think but I think you as a person, if that's where you want to go, you can create some boundaries and some control around it that can be really helpful.
But I also think too, is that maybe sometimes people are not, they look at their independence as a half full glass. I'm always surprised at people I talk to who can't imagine ever going to the movies by themselves. I mean, let's face it, you go to a movie, are you talking in a film? You're sitting next to a stranger on that side, you're not talking. If you talk in a movie to me, I'm going to tell you to shut up. I always think it's very funny when people go on a date and the first thing they do on a date is they go to a movie so you can sit in the talk for 2 hours with someone you don't know and never say a word. That's not exactly, yes, when you come out, you have something to talk to, but it still makes for a very odd first date, I think. But also, before I was with David, I would very often travel for weeks at a time. I would travel by myself. I understand not everybody can do that, but the funny thing about traveling by yourself is it forces you to put yourself out there. And it forces you to put yourself out there as your best self. You really have to go, if I'm going to go out there, what do I got to give people? Why would people want to meet me? Why would people want to talk to me? It's not the easiest thing to do, but I always found it an incredibly positive experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, I think that is like being able to kind of notice the things that you feel vulnerable about and do them anyway. Right? Like I think that's the key is like, wow, this feels really uncomfortable and right. Like I'm going to try it anyway. And if I guess the other thing is that what happens? So you fail. So it doesn't work. Like who cares? And I think we get very wrapped up in like everything we need to do needs to be work or be positive or whatever. And not everything's going to work. And failure is a learning tool. So like if it fails, okay. So what do you do next? But
I think also the point you make too is that it's not always necessary to be comfortable at every moment. And I think, that, look, when you get older, you fall, like we said, we fall into patterns, the things that we're used to, the ways that we live, and you're never too old to shake it up.
Well, there's no growth if you're only living in comfort, right? Like if you are never uncomfortable, there's no movement and there's no growth. So I can't expect to try that new thing if I don't have a little bit of discomfort to push me towards it.
I always kind of cringe when somebody says that, when I ask how people are, and they say, well, they're content. Because it just, I don't know, it just reminds me of warm soup. It's just like, there's so much out there. Why aren't you exercising your curiosity? Why aren't you putting yourself in a new situation where you get to shake things up?
And you know what? Some people don't want to do that. They've reached a point where they're like, I am good right here.
again, I'm making a generalization. There are some people who probably are very happy, just I got what I needed and I'm done. But most of the most interesting people I've spoken to, or the people I like the most, don't fall back into that sort of big overstuffed sofa. They get up out of that sofa and they want to go out there and say, what world can I conquer? What else can I find? What new aspect of my life can I add to?
And I think that waxes and wanes, right? I think that some people are like, I think some people kind of, if we think of life kind of as a mountain, right? We kind of crawl, we're climbing. Some people just want to keep climbing and they stop for a minute and they break. But some people might get to kind of base camp and they need to just stay there for a little while. And they are content. They're content just being at that level. And they did a lot and then they got to that level. And then eventually something might happen where they're like, okay, you know what? I'm ready for the next level. But I think that is so different which is what makes personality and what makes us all different, right? So some people can be very like, I did enough.
Oh no,
good.
I don't think it has to be constant striving. But on the other hand, I think one of the most interesting things I've discovered as I got older is, as much as I know a lot. I'm very lucky. I've had an interesting life. But as much as I know, it always reminds me of how much I don't.
Sure.
Especially, if you're lucky enough to put yourself out there and meet interesting people, there are people who know stuff that you don't. There's people who have experiences that you haven't had. There are people who can open you up to places that you had no idea even existed. And I also find it not just regenerative, I find it invigorating and maybe even better for your health, better for your longevity.
Yeah, well, I think that goes back to kind of having different people of different kind of cultures and generations and decades and all that stuff in our lives, is that it does kind of it helps with, your brain health and your cognition and keeping you sharp, because you're learning keeps all of the neurons firing in your brain, which prevents dementia and helps with cognitive decline and like those kinds of things. We know that creating that community helps stress levels, right? It helps physically and mentally. So all of those things of creating and exploring and engaging has a ton of physical and mental well-being attached to it. And the obstacles are usually put in place by ourselves. Most of us are not avoiding doing those things because we have a physical way we can't do it. Most of us avoid things that are new because they're scary. And I think as we get older, the bad news is we become more rigid and we get more stuck in that thing that scares us. And so we lose that flexibility that we have when we're younger of like, well, what the heck? I might as well try it. There's no reason not to.
I was going to say, how do you modify the word scary until to be the word challenging,
right,
and then go out there to meet that challenge?
Correct. And remind yourself that fear and anxiety are communicated the same way in our bodies.
In what way?
So when you're excited, you get butterflies in your stomach. You might feel a little nauseous. You might get a little sweaty, right? Your heart might quicken. Okay. When you're anxious, you might have butterflies in your stomach, get a little sweaty, your heart might quicken.
I had a friend who was in the theater when they were younger, and then they stopped. They did what they did, and then they stopped. And they got older, and they took a job, and they made a good salary, and then they stopped working, and they retired. And their friend said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And what the person decided to do was move to another area and found an area that had a really strong community theater.
Yeah, beautiful.
And they went, you know what the hell? I'm going to join the community theater. I swear, this person looks 15 years younger.
Yeah. Because there's so many things that are getting attached to that, right? You're moving, you have to memorize lines, you're engaged with other people, you're doing all the things that keep your mind pliable.
Plus, you're also doing something that you've always loved to do without the pressure of, am I going to be a success?
Correct.
And instead now you're just doing it for the love of doing it.
Yes. And so, but thinking about like the things that make us nervous can also excite us. And we can kind of, to your point of scary into challenge, can we also think of, scary into exciting or opportunity or whatever, and how that can look? Because, sometimes just how we think, it's changing how you think about it. Because if we can change how we think about it, it does change how we feel about it. But it's often the bodily whatever that gives us all of that information.
How do you motivate yourself?
So some of my motivating myself starts with routine, right? And it starts like, okay, I'm going to put this in my schedule and it is a non-negotiable for me. And that is one thing that helps me, like with getting to the gym or whatever. Like my morning gym time is like sacred to me. You cannot have it. Even on the mornings that I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. It's like, I know. So like and I think the other way is I stop and I sit and I go, how is this going to help me? Like, why did I want to do this in the first place? What made me excited about this initially, even though I'm so nervous about it now? And I do that kind of internal or external self-talk. Or I also bring in one or two people in my community that I can be that vulnerable with. And I kind of am like, I need you to hold me accountable. I need you to help me do this. And maybe they'll be like, all right, what do we need to do? Do we need to show up and help you get dressed? Do we need to help you pick out your outfit? Do we need to call you beforehand? Do we need, what's the plan? And if I don't feel like, and I think that's the hard part is separating. If I don't think it's going to be helpful to me, hard to motivate for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to identify what that is beforehand.
What are the things that you do often that you know that the indulgences that you know are going to benefit you?
For sure, exercise. For sure. What am I eating and what am I kind of being like? My diet, I like make sure, that's not to say that like I will pass up a really good scoop of ice cream, but like, what am I doing that's kind of good for my health in that way? And I try and take classes and learn something new. I try and keep my brain excited and interested in different things. I think that is probably the thing. And I think I learned that kind of watching people in my life, but I think the more I can try and learn and the other thing is like I work with teenagers. So like I love to work with teenagers because they do inherently keep me young. Like I learn more nonsense that I will never need to know about stuff. But when I don't know, I'm like, okay, show me, play me the music, give me this, tell me more. Like, because I want, they walk in with headphones on. I'm like, what are you listening to? Let me hear it. It's usually awful, unfortunately, but like, um, all auto-tuned. But I think those are I think learning for me is a big one, right? I will go to a workout class because it challenges what I can do. It's not the same routine all the time.
On a slightly different beat, what began your obsession with nail art? Jennifer has the most extraordinary nail art, but how often do you change it? Every 2 weeks?
3 weeks.
Every 3 weeks. And it is mind-boggling. It's like 1 week it's like Moreau, it's another week it's like Matisse. It's just
these are tiles from a floor.
Yeah, that's what I mean. What made you want to do it, and what's the satisfaction you get from something as simple as that?
What made me want to do it? So when I first started doing gel on my nails, I kept it very simple and was like, I'm a professional. I'm a psychologist. I shouldn't do anything more than, simple colors and maybe a little bit of a rhinestone. And then one day I was like, let's do something fun. And I think I did no nonsense. I did blue glitter with like it looked like a old school, like Chevy like a Corvette, like with flames. So it was like yellow and red flames on blue glitter. And it was so fun. And I got a lot of fun reaction. So I got a lot of external validation and feedback. Oh my God, that's
yes.
So that was one reason that was fun. But it's so much fun. It's not a permanent anything. It's a way to express creativity, but I don't have to paint it because I'm not that good of an artist, but I have a really good eye and can pick very cool things that can translate. And so it's two things for me. One is it takes a long time. I sit in that chair at the nail place for like 2.5 hours and
really?
Yeah. By the time they take it off and then do the new art, whatever, it's like a 2.5 hour process. But it's my time. I don't really work. I space out. It's fascinating to watch what they create. So in a way, it's very meditative. So it's a little bit of
right
time for me. And it's really fun to be creative. And it's something that like, if I don't like it after, it goes away and it's not permanent and it's not, and it brings me some joy and like, what's my next move and what can I do next? And what's the, it's like always very fun. And I have this beautiful collaborative relationship with my nail artist and we create super fun stuff. And what's secondarily fun is it brings a lot of other people a lot of joy. What's on your nails now? You haven't done a nail post. I have people that think I should have a nail Instagram. I'm like, who has time for that? But
well, you probably should. Yes.
Like who has time for that? But that's really what I think has become, and now it's kind of become like my thing in a
Your
way.
thing,
And,
right.
but to me, it's just a fun way to have some creative expression that's not so over the top, or I'm not a person who's gonna be so over the top. That's just not who I am. So it's a way to express that but in a boundary that feels comfortable to me.
What besides your nail art helps make you a happy grown-up?
Talking with you. Spending time with my village, right? I think making sure that I create that space. Definitely exercise is something that makes me a happy grown up. I think I am inherently a happy grown up. Like I'm built that way. And
In what way?
I'm built like as an optimistic, happy kind of person. Like I've always been the person who's like, it will be fine, right? Even if I have literally no evidence.
Proof.
I believe in my heart of hearts that things will and not in a Pollyanna way. Which want to feel old, I used that reference to somebody and they were like, I don't know what that means. And I was like, oh, okay. That
I do.
I
So
know
it's
you
okay.
do. So I think that inherently I'm just kind of built to lean towards the kind of optimistic half full side, but I fill my bucket with people that I love, friends, theater, going to the movies, going to concerts, like the things that just those are the kinds of things that really light me up.
As usual, you are both inspiring and full of incredible information, and I think everybody's lucky to be listening to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me for another edition of The Happy Grown Up. And if you want to hear more about all the ways you can be inspired to be new aging, whether it's self-care, travel, relationships, health, creating a next act, dealing with challenges, finding romance, or just getting off on that special person you see in the mirror, please subscribe to our newsletter at thehappygrownup.com. It is such a gift to be all grown up these days, and it sure as hell beats the alternative. You can worry, but be happy.